the WWF Expert Live Q&A. We are going to wait a bit longer so we give people more time to join us. But yeah, today we are going to talk about how is our polar wildlife doing. Thank you so much for joining us here. We are going to talk about probably polar bears, penguins, walruses, and other interesting species, and how they are dealing with the changing climate in climate.
Yeah, so there's a lot to cover, as we said. But while we wait for a few more of you to join the live stream, which just want to remind you can watch on Instagram and YouTube, we just want to thank everyone who submitted questions already. We've been really impressed and quite proud to see how concerned and interested everyone is with the polar regions. So yeah, thank you for that.
So we also, while we wait, we also wanted to mention that today is World Polar Bear Day, which is also the reason why we are doing this live stream today. But I wanted to ask, maybe, do you guys know why is Polar Bear Day today? Do you?
Oh, you can enlighten me.
So the first Polar Bear Day was in 2011, and it was to commemorate or celebrate this majestic species, because in this time of the year, in February, they are still in their dens. The mothers, the female polar bears, the mothers are in their dens with their cubs inside, snuggling and just outside of the cold weather, while we are here talking about them. So yeah, it's very interesting. They will come out of the den probably in March.
So in a couple of weeks' time, we should see baby cubs. Oh, interesting. Very good. So again, thank you for joining. How is polar wildlife doing? Our WWF Expert Q&A seems quite nice to be called expert, so thank you for that. So let's get started. So I'll introduce myself, and Ali, do you want to go after me?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm a polar ocean specialist at WWF UK. You're joining us live from HQ, by the way, the Living Planet Centre in Woking. If you haven't had a chance to come down, maybe that's something for the future. But I support some of the amazing work we do, primarily focusing, as my title would suggest, on the oceans. So in fisheries, marine protected areas, and of course, species conservation.
Thank you. So I'm Alejandra Vergara-Peña. I'm the polar specialist. So I support work on both terrestrial and marine. And I manage different grants that will deal with key science to be able to promote more, to ensure the findings are used in protection for the species and wild places in the Arctic and the Antarctic region.
Yeah, and I'm always very jealous you get to do some of the stuff on land, some of the terrestrial work as well. Yeah. Yeah. So a quick update. We start by giving you some snapshots on some of the latest news from the polls. So to get you started, Ali, do you want to take us away with the first little fact?
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to mention was about polar bears, which is not very good news actually for the species. So some scientists in Manitoba and Canada have been looking at some of the bears, particularly females, that because of the size of their neck, you can get colored. And they have seen, because of the change on the Arctic sea ice, they have seen that the polar bears are changing what they eat. So they are not eating so much seals. So they are eating more they are foraging more, eating different plants. So they are changing from blueberry to berries. But while they do this, looking for berries, they are actually spending more energy looking for that than what they actually gain by eating those. So it's not a very good thing for them in the long term. So some of those other animals that decide not to do that, they are just maybe hibernating. So it's a big change.
So where we're getting the option to change our diets, this is because of climate change and other pressures. This diet change is being pushed on.
Yeah, it's you do it or you do.
Oh God. So going further south, around the Southern Ocean, so that's the ocean that surrounds Antarctica. Krill is a shrimp-like species that is a key species for the food chain down there. And in response to climate change and the oceans that are beginning to exhibit warming conditions, the range of krill is now contracting. So they're following the cooler water. The cooler water is retaining closer and closer to the pole. So we're calling it a poleward migration of their distribution. So that's fairly concerning stuff. Obviously, that has ramifications for the food chain that depends on it. So krill-dependent species or krill predators, such as seals, penguins, very iconic, and even whales will now start having to look in different places, new areas for krill.
Awesome. Oh, the next species I wanted to mention was the Arctic foxes. So this is actually a good news about them. And
Well, that makes a change. Yeah, good stuff.
so this is actually related to some work that was done by our network office, WWF Finland. So the Arctic foxes hadn't reproduced in 25 years. They have, since 20 years ago, they have established like new conservation measurements, such as feeding the Arctic foxes and also keeping the red foxes away from the Arctic foxes area to see if they will breed, and they were successful. I believe there were four calves seen last year, so that's great to know. Hopefully, with the conservation measurements still in place, we will see more calves and better numbers for the species.
Oh, nice. Well done, WWF Finland. Good stuff. I'm going to see your good news. I'm going to continue it. So new technology is enabling us to do new research and look in new parts of the world where previously people have never gone before. And so off the back of this, I can proudly say that 4 new emperor penguin colonies have been discovered, previously unknown to science and to the world. So that's another good bit of news in amongst all the carnage that is climate change and operating in the poles.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's the snapshot. Should we dive into some questions?
Yes, I believe we have had like more questions related to our polar wildlife. Thank you so much, everyone, for submitting those questions. Don't forget also that you can still submit more while we are live as well in the chat or the question tab. So yeah, let's start diving in one of the questions, which is, which animal is most at risk? Which is a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. And it's sad, I don't want to give people a vague answer, but there's sadly just too many species at risk in our polar regions to directly compare. It's sort of apples and pears, as the expression goes. And with the effects of climate change beginning to become more profound, any answer given today might very well be different in a few years or a year's time. So sometimes it's best not to put one on the pedestal at the detriment of all the others. However, Ali and I do want to give you an example of a species under threat from each of the poles. So I don't know if you want to start with the Arctic?
Yes, I'm going to start with the Arctic, continue with what I was mentioning before, with polar bears. So we know the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the world, which is terrible. We know that the summer sea ice is actually decreasing every year. We see that the ice is forming later in the autumn and is like melting early in the spring every year. So this means that the ice is actually melting beneath the polar bears. We know that the polar bears, so there are 19 subspecies of polar bears. 2 of them are, we know that are increasing. 4 of the subspecies are stable. 3 of the subpopulations are declined, and that means the 10 other subpopulations are actually data deficiency. So it's like we don't know what's going on with them. We know that there are around 20,000 individuals of polar bears, but that's not a very big number for like such an important species. So yeah, we know we need to continue our conservation efforts to protect these species. We need to continue also seeing how we can learn more of how they are dealing with the climate change, like the Manitoba project that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, we need to make changes to protect so that the ice doesn't keep melting as fast as it's melting.
Yeah, and I guess where you have data deficiency, you need to have precautionary anyway.
Exactly.
God, I mean, big thing with polar bears today. So that's the Arctic. So I'll give an example of Antarctica, of a species that's at real risk. So in recent years, Antarctica has experienced some of its lowest ever recorded sea ice. In fact, its lowest ever recorded sea ice, both in winter and in summer, which has had dramatic impacts on the wildlife that depends on it. So one of these key species is very iconic. A lot of you hopefully have heard about it, and if not, you're about to find out, is the emperor penguin. With this reduction in sea ice dramatically impacting its ability to raise its young. This significant decline that we've seen in 2022, we've gone over satellite imagery, and it's shown the catastrophic colony failures. So they lay their eggs on sea ice, they raise their chicks on sea ice, but it depends on having enough sea ice there to go through the full life cycle. Unfortunately, what we've seen in recent years is that sea ice either is retreating, is too thin, or it's retreating too quickly. So in 4 of the 5 colonies that were studied in this scientific research in 2022, there was 0 chick survival because the sea ice declined so significantly and so quickly that the chicks never had a chance to develop their waterproof down, well, not down, but waterproof to enable them to exist in those conditions. That was in 2022. We've also seen 2023 was, I think, an even worse year for sea ice, and so we've now got studies looking into what the ramifications are and what these compound impacts of multiple years of breeding failures might mean for such an iconic species that is really at the forefront of this massive environmental change that's going on in Antarctica. So I guess we'll move on to question 2. So you asked the last one, I'll go with this one. So there's been quite a few questions asked on what is being done on protecting the animals and what WWF can do. So I just thought, take it away, why not highlight some of the stuff we've been doing recently?
Yes, so we have a huge variety of projects supporting pioneer science and conservation to protect the species, and also to use this science as evidence to push for international agreements so that we can benefit the polar regions. So as an example, I'm going to continue with my polar bears.
Yeah,
so
we're seeing a thing for today.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a project together with WWF Global Arctic Program, which is using eDNA, so environmental DNA. So what the experts are doing is that they go to the Arctic, and rather than looking for polar bears and also maybe disturbing them, what they do is that they look for footprints.
Okay.
And then when they find them, they scoop a little bit of the snow.
From the footprint?
For the footprint.
Yeah.
Footprint, yes. A little bit of snow, and then they analyze it with markers and DNA things, magic.
Yeah.
And then they can see actually which specific polar bear it is, or how it's related to other ones and things like that. So it's been very it's a novel thing, because other people had worked with other species I believe Arctic foxes and other species in the Arctic, but not so specific to be able to say how to be able to find families, let's say, how some polar bears individuals are related to others, to see maybe if they are inbreeding or things like that.
You get close kin analysis.
Yeah. So it's quite big, very interesting. One of the other projects we are doing is in Antarctica with our Adelie penguins. So we have our partners are tagging the Adelie penguins, and with this information, what we want to see is what when they go out on sea to forage, to feed, where they actually go. And with this information, we are going to be able to see where are the hot spots for krill. Yeah. Since you mentioned also that krill is so important, and we also really need to protect them. So this is also like a way of helping both species.
So when we're talking earlier on about the poleward contraction in some case studies of krill, you'll be seeing these krill-dependent predators also then responding to these movements.
Exactly. Otherwise, what we're going to eat.
Yeah.
The other project that we also have in the Arctic is called Arctic Blue Corridors. So what we are doing with that project is we are evaluating narwhals, belugas, bowhead whales. So the Arctic
Lot of whales.
whales,
Yeah.
the Arctic whales. So we want to map their migration routes, because we know that they use the Arctic as a migration corridor. Let's say they use it more in the summer or more in the winter. So we want to see that, like where they go to and out of, and also by mapping these corridors and interpolating that with the shipping activity that is increasing in the area, and we can see how we can protect these species. So it's very interesting, all the things that we are involved there. But I also believe that you can maybe give us a little bit more of insights of what we do.
Well, yeah, of course. So you touched upon it there. So we go beyond just species conservation, as Ali alluded to, and actually it's really interesting that you mentioned the Arctic Blue Corridors, because that feeds into a massive project we're doing in the Arctic Ocean called ArcNet. So it's the first ever project that's mapped an entire basin of where the most sensitive areas are that need developing marine protected areas. So think of them kind of as like, to the uninitiated, kind of like national parks where you don't want too much human activity there because it's got really sensitive species, or it's got a really complex habitat or ecosystem that's present. And like you said, talking about layering different things, we're now actually looking at bringing in migratory routes as part of this plan. But yeah, going back to ArcNet, so it's something that was designed with all the WWF national offices that are in the Arctic Circle, as well as being co-led by Arctic Indigenous peoples, recognizing the knowledge and history that they have in that area, as well as scientists from across the globe that have all fed into this. As I said, I think it's the first of its kind across an ocean basin, and with global ambition now looking towards protecting 30% of our freshwater, terrestrial, mangrove, and marine areas, this is something that can directly feed into that. And importantly, a lot of it will also be in the high seas. So where a lot of nations, where your sea limit is normally 200 nautical miles, there are parts of the Arctic Ocean that sits outside everyone's 200 nautical miles. So it's really important that not only do Arctic nations look after their own sea space, but that we all come together to this basically common area for common good is also looked after properly, and that's also incorporated. So yeah, really exciting stuff in one of the most fragile and unbelievable parts of the planet. So yeah, exciting times.
Exciting times indeed.
Right, you asked the last one, so me to go for you. So we've also had quite a lot of questions around how you at home on Instagram and on YouTube can help, whether that's in your everyday life or locally. Ali, you live and breathe by this sort of stuff. You've got some amazing tips, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually like a very broad question, and actually, as you said, I think it kind of touches me because I do like, of course, when we do like going to governments and like pushing for actions, but I do believe that we as individuals need to do our individual little to help bigger. So related to that, I wanted to say that what happens in the polar regions, what happens in the Arctic and in the Antarctic doesn't actually stay in those regions. It affects the whole planet. So these areas act as a thermostat for the planet, and they influence the weather patterns. So if these regions do very bad, we see more climate change and more sea ice melting, it's gonna really affect the whole planet.
Yeah.
So how can we help? I think there are lots of ways that we all can make positive changes for the planet and for the polar species, of course. So the first one, maybe just like in more general, is just to look at how to reduce your consumption, or like how to watch your carbon footprint. So for example, at home, just turn off the equipment that you are not using. When you are not using them, also just unplug the equipment. Of course, try not to use single-use plastic. So carry your own bottle to drink water, carry your own mug for tea or coffee. Maybe just some cutlery also, so that you don't have to use plastic cutlery. Of course, just walk, run more, use less the car, use less take less flights.
Yeah.
Share the car, take more the train, things like that. Also recycle properly. I think here in the UK we have the recycling culture a bit more embedded, but I feel like sometimes people don't remember to clean the plastic that they are going to put there, or that they don't separate it properly. That's also something that is really needed. Also in terms of like looking at for what you eat, so that it doesn't contain things that are not sustainable, or eat more locally, so that like some like local farmers can have like the veggies or the fruits that you want. Also the fruits that are in season, so that the like avocados from Latin America or something, or the also another one that I feel like it's not very taught in the UK is like when you are brushing your teeth or washing the dishes, remember to close the tap. Because also to clean the water and make it like drinkable, you need to spend lots of energy for that to make it safely to drink. So also think about that. Maybe we don't have the problem of like having less water, but we do need to look after that as well.
Yeah, also I actually know the fact that particularly in the southeast of the UK, it's one of the most water stressed parts of the world. There's just so many people, the infrastructure needs an update. So yeah, where you can save it, little things make a big difference.
Yes, little things make a big difference. So this is also where I want to mention how you can help and help us. So this is the moment for me to mention the Walrus on Sprays project. You guys probably have heard of it. It's very important. It's also using new technologies like the emperor penguin that you mentioned earlier. So we are looking to study walrus from satellite images. Contrary to the species that we have mentioned before, we know very little about walruses, so we don't know how they are doing with the climate change and the loss of sea ice. So we do want to know if they are coping or if they're not, what we can do about that. So what we have collected lots and lots of satellite images from space. So we have like hundreds of thousands of images, but we don't have the same amount of scientists. So like people to help us
become detectives.
This is when our public can become detectives, and they can help us. Also, they can contribute and become citizen science scientists and help us. So you can log on our website, become detectives. You will have a little train session, so don't be scared. We will train you, and then you can help us to look for walruses and count them, and fully be able to see if they are doing well. Then it could be a flag species that can help us as an example for conservation of other things.
Cool.
You can also find. You can also help fund science in the polar regions when you start adopting with WWF. You are directly contributing towards projects that protect the species.
So the daily tagging, all of this, all the work we've spoken about directly comes from the adoptions.
Yes, and polar bears and things directly from your help, guys. So thank you so much for that. So I think the question number 4, so I will ask, is also related to the other one. So we also had a specific question from you guys, which is how schools can help besides teaching kids about the climate crisis.
Good question. Schools can definitely get on board with the journey, beyond obviously continuing to inspire the next generation. So a big reason why I'm here to this day in this building and in this role was at school. I had a teacher that really believed in me and really opened my eyes to stuff that like wasn't necessarily in the national curriculum, but like wanted to push us further and to explore more. So that goes without saying, is to always push, and you don't know what inspires you until someone puts it in front of you. So the more broad range of things you can get your school kids involved with, be that environmentalism or whatever, is always key. But more pragmatically, I guess it'd be thinking about the energy that your school consumes is one big thing. Whether you can refit retro boilers, how people are getting into school. I remember everyone in my village used to walk to school. The same village now, everyone drives in. So maybe just as parents, think about whether you could do that extra 20 minutes of walking in the morning with your kids. And also just to have a look at also other ways of interacting with the environment, whether that be if you're blessed enough to have the space, growing your own food, maybe doing meat or dairy-free days at school to lower the carbon footprint of the consumption that you're eating, and to take positive action. So get involved with your local community, plant trees, invite people into the school for education evenings if you have the capacity to do that. Write to your MP or MSP and just, yeah, drive change from the school out, is what I'd say. All right.
Do you want to look at this one? I think about it, and then
Oh, you want that one? We're getting quite a few live ones through. What about the blue one?
Yeah, you go for that one.
Cool,
It's a
okay.
special one.
Yeah, it is. Carl Smith, what is your favourite polar species and why? Do you want me, can I go first?
I want to say hi to Carl.
Yeah, Carl, great question. For me, it's the humble krill. It's tiny, and yet from that, basically the entire ecosystem in the Southern Ocean depends on that. From the largest ever species that we know of yet, the blue whale, to amazing penguins and seal species, it all kind of comes down to krill. So yes, they may not be iconic and something you put on your mantelpiece, but it's definitely something that I can relate to. Also, they look kind of weird, and I feel I look a bit weird sometimes.
No.
Yeah. Do you want to answer it as well?
I don't think I have a favorite one.
Oh, really? Oh, God. Hang on, if I said one thing, then.
No, they're all amazing.
Yeah.
I do love penguins, but then also like walruses, and then like narwhals are like kind of like
Oh, so iconic. Yeah.
so
They're their teeth, you know that.
yeah, exactly. And they're so clever teeth that like for like, to be able to track or like to see where prey are. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I can choose one.
Okay, I now feel guilty. Sorry, every other polar species. I do love you, but krill takes it for the time being.
Another question that we had just had is, how are penguins doing? So I think we can say that it depends on the species.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned before, emperor penguins are not doing great. We know that they have experienced lots of breeding failure. We have less and less breeding pairs, so they are actually classified as near dead, I believe. So
it also depends on whether they can adapt. So you're seeing some species that are more generalists doing better in comparison to other penguin species. But as you mentioned, the emperor penguin that relies on sea ice for its breeding success is doing really badly across a lot of parts of Antarctica.
Yeah. Would you like to mention too?
Okay, from YouTube, how likely is it that we can slow the loss of polar ice enough to save vulnerable species? That is a great question, and it all kind of stems on how much we're all willing to roll up our sleeves. What are we willing as humans to sacrifice in order to preserve or mitigate the worst impacts of climate change? It's a really difficult question because you have different forecastings that are showing the trajectory that we're on, but it requires us to take action. So every time they revisit these forecastings, and humanity as a whole is lagging on these commitments, both in legislation and delivery on the ground, the forecasts get worse. So we have this desire, and we would urge everyone that 1.5 degrees is what we need to aim for. If we can get 1.5, we can mitigate. Climate change is happening. So it's what can we all do now to protect what we've got? And it starts with everyone who's watching today. It starts with everyone in this building. We are all connected to this. There's no one that can escape climate change because it's happening everywhere. There's that new film, Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's climate change. And it all, yeah, we're all in this together. So please do what you can. Ali and I have outlined some of the things you can do, like be a bit more conscious with your diet, contribute to your local community in like nature positive action, and also just inspire, learn as much as you can. And when you get inspired, it doesn't even need to be about polar bears or krill, as much as that hurts me. Find something that lights your fire and pass that fire on to someone else.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Okay, I think so. We have run out of time. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining our WWF Expert Q&A. And I hope you have enjoyed. Please also, if you have more questions, just put them there and we will answer them.
And if you can, remember, always detectives. We need as many of you as possible.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thanks, everyone.